I remember when I was a kid in the early 90s that I used to play this video game called Budokan. It was a fighting video game in which you had to go through a series of tournaments of the main martial arts. It was karate, it was nunchakus, it was bow staff, and a couple more. It was really fun, very realistic movements. But the thing that stuck with me after all those years, after playing that video game, is that in between the levels, there were these intermission screens that had Eastern philosophy or Zen quotes. So it was really interesting to see that at that age. And I remember one of those quotes that stuck with me for a long time was patience. It was along these lines. Patience is one of the most important virtues of a man. And I said, oh, all right, that checks out. So I have to develop patience, right? And I certainly had to develop patience because patience always is rewarded. And in this case, my patience was rewarded with something that I tweeted about a while ago. And it's this: comedy gold. Ottawa's annual Pride Parade got cancelled today, not by weather, not by logistics, but by pro-Palpatine protesters. And I couldn't help but laugh at this. But this is as dystopian but fun as you can imagine. And I had tweeted a year ago in August 5, 2024, forget about the Olympics and football, I want tickets to the impending face-off between Muslims and LGBTQ communities at Trafalgar Square. I was joking, of course. Daniel, black belt barrister, told me, Jesus, you cannot make jokes about that. Be careful. No, by a face-off, I was talking about a dance face-off. Nothing violent. So I was not talking about that. But it so happens that it materialized in Ottawa, in Canada. And it's so fun to find out that two agendas that had been thoroughly pushed by the woke people, that they don't have our best interests at heart. They don't have the Western world best interests at heart. They just want the chaos. It so happens that it ran into kind of a glitch, a conflict. It's trying to push that narrative, that alphabet narrative, that alphabet agenda everywhere. In schools, in every single space, in crosswalks, in Florida at least, they are erasing all those, repainting or unpainting all those rainbow colored crosswalks. That is great. That is a start. We are, going back to common sense. But we also have all these protesters for causes that are, like the pro-Palpatine people. Although I was mentioning Muslims, and I was mentioning Muslims in the sense that that they really don't like homosexuals, right? So that could be a bit conflicting. It's a bit of a conflict of interest, and it so happens that at some point you can only go so far pushing both the narratives. And I mentioned Trafalgar Square because, I thought that this was going to happen in London at some point. This only shows, I'm not going to say that this couldn't happen in London, but this only shows, I'm going to give it to Sadiq Candice, that they are better organized in London to avoid this from happening. Maybe that's part of the logistics. Or make sure that the rainbow color people don't never mess with the Palpatine people or the usual Muslims that are in the city. But at some point you realize, especially when you see this kind of examples, that they're pushing those manifestations pro-Palpatine, and you have your Pride Parade that started as some kind of pride of being gay. All right, I guess. I always thought that you have to be pride is something that you're proud of something that you do, that you create. We are creators. We should be proud of something that we create or that we nurture, that we construct. Um, Sometimes, oh, I'm proud of being Venezuelan. All right, but what did I do to be Venezuelan? Just be born in it? That is a bit odd. Or maybe I'm proud of building this for Venezuela. That is a different thing. So that's the way I see pride. But we know that the pride parades in most of the world have become this completely it's a outlandish display of perversion that ironically, you see all these Muslim communities pushing back against that. And you say, what is happening? So the people are on one hand complaining that, okay, we are giving them too much territory. Oh, wait a second. It's that you're not giving them territory. It's the governments that are giving them territory, and the governments, your government, whether it's local governments in the United States or in Canada or the UK, they are allowing it. And I have to remind you that you voted for that, and maybe if there's some kind of pushback, like in the Cracker Barrel case, that I should be talking about Cracker Barrel. But the Cracker Barrel is a great example that pushback actually works. And the erasing of the crosswalks, of the rainbow color crosswalks, is also proof that pushback works. What has happened? Is the tide turning? I don't know. But meanwhile, this is one of the best examples. When you see, like, I remember that banner. I remember the banner, like, gays for Palpatine. And it's like, I'm seeing the thing and I say that, what what do you mean? What do you mean? You go there and you know what they're going to do to you, right? They're going to go full Pinochet on you, only without the helicopter. They're going to be more practical. They're going to use rooftops on you. Okay, so you have to be, you gotta have a bit of common sense in your life to understand how this works. But it's obvious that this, let's say, Soros sanctioned protests and Soros injected manifestations and all these movements are meant only for one thing: to erode the Western world's values, what made us great in the first place. And yes, that is something, the values and principles, it is what separates us from, well, we could say, what we were in the past, because I wouldn't say that, oh yeah, the Western world just appeared with all prosperity and technology and culture and everything just out of the blue. No, there was a lot of mixing. There were a lot of wars, of course. But at some point, you realize that we need some kind of common principles and common values, and that is one of the targets of globalism. They want to minimize those values. They want to use immigration, I've said that time and time again, to erode those values, because it would be great if other cultures arrive to your country and assimilate it. At no point people are requesting those people to leave their religion out or leave their culture out. You just have to not impose them on the local population. And at the same time, we expect our governments to not impose that on our culture. Because if everyone is behaving, if everyone is striving for a better country, if everybody wants to actually coexist in peace, then what would be the problem? But that is not the problem. The actual problem is mixing without assimilation. It will always be like that. And you realize how absurd this thing has become, in which, I finally was My patience was rewarded watching how this house of cards is just crumbling down, imploding. I mean, I don't want to see any kind of violence on the streets. I think that violence, whether you might have seen those my jokes on X, and X I see a lot of outrageous stuff. Violence is not the answer in this case, because I think we should understand each other, unless of course you begin pushing that rainbow stuff inside schools, which you should not. I'm not saying that we are going to use violence on you. I'm just going to say that should not be aired. And in the most unlikely way, it's Muslims, the ones who are going to say, hey, no, you cannot do that. So again, it's a bit of ironic, right? How everything has evolved to this point, and how there's so many countries in which, in fact, if you respect the boundaries of your neighbor, they will respect your boundaries as well. And how does that work? Well, it works because crime is actually punished. And when you actually punish crime, maybe that way we can have an actual society with actual culture, with different cultures, in fact, and different religions. Why not? Because it used to work in some places. It can work in other places as well. But let me know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Battle Language Guy. Much love and bliss.